I don't know. I guess probably because I'm black and I'm young and I like this music a whole lot, you know. And I decided quite a while ago that, you know, I just want to play the music and that's it. And that's the most important thing. And so if you really like what you're doing, it's going to show. That's what my dad always taught me anyway.
Robert Cray, the iconic blues guitarist, has mesmerized fans for years with his soulful tunes and his close bond with Eric Clapton. However, what appeared to be a perfect friendship eventually took a turn. Now, at 71, Cray is finally sharing the truth behind his once strong connection with Clapton. What went wrong? Join us as we delve into the fascinating story of Robert Cray and Eric Clapton. Robert William Cray is a famous American blues guitarist and singer. He is known for his amazing guitar skills, soulful voice, and contributions to the blues genre. His journey into music started early in his life, during his school years in Newport News, Virginia, where he played in his first band, the One-Way Street. Later, his family moved to Tacoma, Washington, where Cray continued his musical journey at Lakes High School. By the time he was 20, Cray had already seen some of his musical idols, such as Albert Collins, Freddie King, and Muddy Waters, perform live. Inspired by these legendary blues artists, he decided to start his own band and began performing in college towns on the West Coast. In the late 1970s, Cray formed the Robert Cray Band in Eugene, Oregon, and collaborated with Curtis Salgado in the Cray Hawks. He even appeared uncredited as a bassist in the film National Lampoon's Animal House. In the 1980s, Cray's music started to gain attention. He released his album Who's Been Talkin' in 1980, followed by 2 albums, Bad Influence and False Accusations, which helped him build a reputation, especially in Europe. His album Showdown was a collaboration with his heroes, Albert Collins and Johnny Copeland. However, it was his album Strong Persuader that really made him famous. The album earned Cray a Grammy Award and featured the hit single Smoking Gun, which gave him widespread recognition. Throughout the 1980s, Cray played with major stars like Tina Turner and Keith Richards and was invited to perform with Chuck Berry in the film Chuck Berry, Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll. By the late 1980s, he was selling out large venues and gaining a huge following. He became well known for playing Fender guitars, especially the Stratocaster, and there are now special Robert Cray models available for fans. In the 1990s, Cray's career continued to thrive. He played alongside blues legends like John Lee Hooker and B.B. King. He also performed at the Guitar Legends concerts in Spain, where he shared the stage with artists like Albert Collins. Cray's involvement in the blues world continued to grow, and he played with Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, and Stevie Ray Vaughan in what would be Vaughan's final performance before his tragic death. Cray's recognition continued into the 2000s. In 2005, he was inducted into Hollywood's Rock Walk at Guitar Center. He also performed at the Crossroads Guitar Festival and supported Eric Clapton during his world tour. He was also inducted into the Blues Hall of Fame, and he received the Americana Music Lifetime Achievement Award for performance. Despite facing major fallout with Eric Clapton, Cray's impact on the blues world remains strong. He continues to record, perform, and inspire new generations of blues musicians. While some fans believe that Cray has a very valid reason to cut ties with his friend Clapton, some speculation suggests that he may have been jealous of Clapton and what he has achieved. But could this be true? We will leave you to decide. First, let's find out more about Eric Clapton. Eric Clapton is an English rock and blues guitarist, singer, and songwriter. Considered one of the most successful and influential guitarists in rock music, he was ranked second on Rolling Stone's list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time, and fourth on Gibson's top 50 guitarists of all time. In 2009, Time magazine named him number 5 on their list of the 10 best electric guitar players. Eric picked up the guitar as a teenager and quickly fell in love with the blues. He played in small bands at first, but his big break came when he joined the Yardbirds in 1963. Though the band became famous for its pop hits, Clapton was more interested in pure blues music. So, he left and joined John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, where he truly made a name for himself as a guitar virtuoso. Clapton's fame skyrocketed when he formed Cream with drummer Ginger Baker and bassist Jack Bruce. This power trio blended blues with rock and long, dramatic solos. They recorded 4 albums and became one of the biggest bands of the time. but tensions between the members led to their breakup after 2 years the band was formed. Not one to slow down, Clapton then formed Blind Faith with Steve Winwood, Ginger Baker, and Rick Gresh. The band was hugely anticipated, but lasted only one album before falling apart. By the 1970s, Clapton was searching for his own sound. He played with Delaney and Bonnie before forming Derek and the Dominoes, a band that created Layla and other assorted love songs. The song Layla became one of his most famous works, inspired by his deep, unspoken love for Pattie Boyd, who was then married to his friend George Harrison. However, the band's success was short-lived, and Clapton soon found himself struggling with substance addiction. After overcoming his addiction, Clapton re-emerged in the mid-70s with a solo career that would make him a global superstar. His cover of Bob Marley's I Shot the Sheriff introduced reggae to a wider audience. His album Slow Hand delivered classics like Wonderful Tonight and Cocaine. The 1980s saw him experiment with pop and rock, leading to hits like Forever Man and Pretending. Tragedy struck in 1991 when his 4-year-old son, Connor, fell from a high-rise window. Overwhelmed with grief, Clapton wrote Tears in Heaven, a heartbreaking song that became one of his most famous works. The song appeared on his Unplugged album, which won multiple Grammy Awards and reignited his career. In the late 1990s and beyond, Clapton returned to his blues roots, releasing tribute albums to blues legends and founding the Crossroads Guitar Festival, which brings together the world's best guitarists to raise money for addiction recovery centers. He also recorded major hits like Change the World and My Father's Eyes, proving his ability to adapt to different styles. With over 100 million records sold, 18 Grammy Awards, and 3 inductions into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Clapton is one of the most celebrated musicians of all time. Despite facing personal and professional struggles, he has continued to share his love for music, inspiring generations of guitarists. Even in 2024, he remains active, releasing new music and performing worldwide, ensuring that his legacy as one of rock and blues' greatest guitarists lives on. What role did his formative years play in the man Eric has become? Eric Clapton was born in a small English village called Ripley in Surrey, but from the very beginning, his life was different from most children's. His mother, Patricia, was only 16 years old when she had him. His father, Edward, was a Canadian soldier who left for war before Eric was born. He never came back, returning instead to Canada and leaving young Eric without a father figure. Because his mother was so young, Eric was raised by his grandparents, Rose and Jack Clapp. To make things even more confusing, he grew up believing they were his real parents and that his mother was actually his older sister. It wasn't until he was older that he learned the truth, that the woman he thought was his sister was actually his mother. This discovery left him feeling lost and disconnected from his family and from himself. When Eric was a child, his mother moved away to Germany with another Canadian soldier she married, but Eric stayed behind in England with his grandparents. He was a quiet, thoughtful boy, often feeling like he didn't quite fit in. But then, something changed. Music entered his life. On his 13th birthday, he received a gift that would change his future, a guitar. It was an acoustic Hoyer guitar from Germany, but the strings were made of steel and very hard to press down. Frustrated, young Eric put it aside, thinking maybe music wasn't for him. But 2 years later, he picked it up again, determined to make it work. He became obsessed with blues music, the deep and emotional style that seemed to speak directly to him. He listened to records for hours, carefully figuring out how to play along. He recorded himself on a reel-to-reel tape recorder, listening back over and over until he got every note just right. He practiced for hours every day, losing himself in the sound of the blues. By the time he was 16, his talent was undeniable. He left school and tried to study at Kingston College of Art, but his mind wasn't on painting or drawing. It was on his guitar. Eventually, the school expelled him because he was more focused on music than his studies. But Eric didn't care. He knew what he wanted. He started busking on the streets of Kingston, Richmond, and London's West End, playing for anyone who would listen. Soon, he found another young musician who loved the blues as much as he did, Dave Brock. Together, they played in local pubs around Surrey, slowly building their confidence. Then, at 17, Eric got his first big break. He joined a band called The Roosters. a British R&B group. One of the other guitarists was Tom McGuinness, who would later become famous with Manfred Mann. Clapton played with the Roosters for less than a year. Not long after, he played a short series of gigs with another band, Casey Jones and the Engineers. Though these early bands didn't make him famous, they were the stepping stones to something much bigger, as he eventually made it to the world of professional music, where his extraordinary guitar skills made him a legend. But what is actually going on between Eric Clapton and Robert Cray? Robert Cray and Eric Clapton were once close friends, brought together by their love of music. Both were legendary guitarists, playing blues and rock on some of the biggest stages in the world. They shared laughs, stories, and a deep respect for each other's talent. But over time, their friendship would be tested in a way neither had expected. One day, Clapton released a song about the pandemic. In the lyrics, he compared the restrictions people faced during the pandemic to slavery. This shocked Cray. He had grown up in Georgia, a place where black people had fought long and hard for their rights. He knew the real history of slavery, the suffering, the injustice, and the struggle that continued even after it ended. To Cray, comparing a temporary lockdown to centuries of forced labor and cruelty was deeply offensive. Unsure of what to think, Cray decided to reach out to his friend directly. He sent Clapton an email, hoping to understand why he had written those lyrics. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe Clapton didn't realize how hurtful his words were. But when Clapton replied, his answer left Cray even more troubled. Clapton said he was talking about slaves from Old England, not American slavery. To Cray, this explanation felt weak, like an excuse rather than a real attempt to understand why the comparison was so wrong. Cray tried to move past it, but something had changed. Then, a new image made things even clearer. He saw a photo of Clapton standing next to Texas Governor Greg Abbott. Abbott had recently signed some of the strictest abortion laws in the country and supported voting restrictions that made it harder for many people, especially minorities, to vote. When Cray looked at that picture, he thought back to another image, one taken years before. In that older photo, Cray sat beside Clapton, blues legend B.B. King, and guitarist Jimmy Vaughn. It was a moment of unity, a celebration of music and friendship. But now, seeing Clapton with a politician whose views Cray strongly disagreed with, he felt a deep sense of disappointment. He asked himself, who is Eric now? How did we end up in such different places? Cray realized he couldn't ignore what he was feeling. He had built his life and career around honesty, integrity, and standing up for what he believed was right. As much as he had once admired Clapton, he could no longer stand by someone whose views had become, in his eyes, extreme and selfish. So he made a choice. He walked away, letting go of their friendship. Instead of dwelling on the past, Cray focused on what mattered most to him: his music, his principles, and the people who shared his vision of respect and understanding. The blues had always been about truth, and for Cray, the truth was clear. Some friendships, no matter how strong they once were, cannot survive when values drift too far apart. But how did they meet? Where and when did this meeting happen? Eric Clapton and Robert Cray's musical paths crossed in the mid-1980s, but their collaboration was solidified in 1986 when Cray joined Clapton on the album August. Their relationship, however, truly took shape during the Prince's Trust Rock Gala in London, where they played together on stage. At the time, Cray was gaining recognition for his modern, yet deeply rooted blues sound, showcased in his breakthrough album Strong Persuader. His hit Smoking Gun had caught Clapton's attention. Here was a young bluesman who had managed to bridge the gap between traditional and contemporary blues with a fresh, soulful edge. Clapton, who had long idolized blues legends, was drawn to Cray's expressive guitar playing and smooth vocals. By the late 80s, Cray was invited to open for Clapton on his Journeyman tour. Night after night, they shared the stage, often jamming together, with Cray's crisp Stratocaster licks blending seamlessly with Clapton's signature tone. Their chemistry led to further collaborations, and in 1990, Cray played a key role on Journeyman, adding backing vocals and guitar work. Their friendship deepened through shared respect and admiration. But one of the most poignant moments of their collaboration came when Cray was part of the all-star lineup at the 24 Nights concerts at London's Royal Albert Hall. These legendary performances saw Cray standing shoulder to shoulder with Clapton, Buddy Guy, and others, reaffirming his place among blues royalty. Tragically, their connection also extended to loss. On the 26th of August, 1990, Cray was with Clapton in Wisconsin, set to perform at Alpine Valley Music Theater alongside Stevie Ray Vaughan. After the show, Cray chose to drive to his next destination, while Clapton and Vaughan boarded separate helicopters. Vaughan's helicopter tragically crashed, killing him and all aboard. The loss deeply affected both Clapton and Cray, further solidifying the bond between them as bluesmen who had witnessed the fragility of life. Through the years, Cray and Clapton have continued to perform together, their collaborations representing a bridge between blues generations. What happened to this relationship, and when exactly did it sour? Eric Clapton and Robert Cray's relationship soured in 2021 over Clapton's controversial stance on the pandemic. Cray, who had long admired and collaborated with Clapton, was deeply disturbed by some of Clapton's comments and actions, particularly his song, "This Has Gotta Stop," which Cray saw as promoting anti-vaccine and anti-lockdown sentiments. Their falling out escalated when Cray, who is black, read an interview where Clapton discussed his past racist comments from the 1970s, but failed, in Cray's view, to fully acknowledge their impact. Cray sent an email to Clapton questioning him about it, but he found Clapton's response dismissive. Feeling disrespected and alienated, Cray cut ties, declining to continue their scheduled tour together. While Clapton has downplayed the rift publicly, Cray has been vocal about his disappointment, saying he could no longer support Clapton's views or be associated with him. Their once strong musical partnership now appears irreparably broken, but their legacy goes on. Eric Clapton didn't just wake up one day as one of the greatest guitarists of all time. His sound, his style, and even his passion for music were shaped by the legends who came before him. These musicians weren't just names to him. They were teachers, heroes, and in some cases, like family. One of Clapton's biggest influences was Muddy Waters, the great bluesman from Mississippi. When Clapton first heard Waters' deep, raw voice and powerful guitar, he felt something awaken inside him. It was more than just music. It was a language of pain, joy, and survival. Later in life, when Clapton actually got to meet Waters, he described him as the father figure he never really had. They became close, but during this time, Clapton was struggling with heavy drinking. Sadly, Waters passed away in 1983. But his influence on Clapton's playing and soul never faded. Then there were the three kings of the blues, B.B. King, Albert King, and Freddie King. These men each had their own style, from B.B.'s smooth and expressive bends to Albert's sharp and aggressive notes, to Freddie's fiery attack on the strings. Clapton learned from all of them, blending their techniques into his own sound. He even got to work with B.B. King directly, recording an album together in 2000 called Riding with the King. In the music video, Clapton plays the role of a chauffeur, driving B.B. King around, a sign of deep respect for his idol. But if there was one musician who truly shaped Clapton's heart and soul, it was Robert Johnson. Johnson was a mysterious blues musician from the 1930s who recorded only a few songs before dying young, but his music was filled with deep, haunting emotions. Clapton once wrote that Johnson's voice and guitar seemed to echo something inside him, something he had always felt but never knew how to express. In 2008, Clapton honored Johnson by recording an album of his songs, Sessions for Robert Johnson. Even after decades of playing the blues, Clapton still believed that no music was more powerful than Johnson's. Clapton's influences didn't stop at the blues. As a teenager, he was also inspired by Buddy Holly, the early rock and roll pioneer. The first album Clapton ever bought was The Chirping Crickets by Holly's band. He still remembers the moment he first saw Buddy Holly on TV, holding a Fender guitar. "I thought I'd died and gone to heaven," Clapton said. The sight of that sleek, futuristic guitar convinced him this was his future. Some of Clapton's influences were unexpected. In the documentary Eric Clapton, Life in 12 Bars, he mentioned that he wanted his guitar to sound like the reed instrument of Bismillah Khan, an Indian musician who played the shehnai, a type of traditional wind instrument. This showed how deeply Clapton thought about sound. He wasn't just copying other guitarists, he was trying to capture emotions from instruments far beyond rock and blues. Another surprising influence was Little Walter, a blues harmonica player. When Clapton heard Walter's harmonica played through an amplifier, he was blown away. The sound was rich, full, and powerful. It wasn't just about the notes, it was about the feeling behind them. Clapton tried to recreate that same depth and thickness in his own guitar playing. All these musicians, from bluesmen to rock pioneers to Indian classical players, helped shape Clapton into the artist he became. He took pieces of their sound, their emotions, and their techniques, mixing them together into something unique. That's why, when you hear Clapton play, you're not just hearing one man. You're hearing the echoes of all the legends who came before him. Eric Clapton's name is written in the history of music, like a legend carved in stone. He is not just another guitarist, he is one of the greatest to ever play. From the moment he picked up a guitar as a teenager, he changed the way people thought about music. Over the years, his playing, his sound, and even his attitude toward the guitar shaped rock and blues forever. Clapton is the only musician to be inducted 3 times into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, once as a solo artist and separately as a member of the Yardbirds and Cream. That alone tells you how much of an impact he made. When people talk about guitar heroes, his name always comes up. In fact, in the 1960s, fans were so in awe of his talent that they started writing "Clapton is God" on walls around London. His fiery blues solos and emotional playing made him more than just a musician. He was a symbol of what a guitarist could be. But Clapton's influence wasn't just about his skill. He also changed the way music was recorded. In the early days, sound engineers placed microphones just a few inches from a guitar amplifier. Clapton didn't like this. He wanted recordings to sound more like they did in a live concert, where the music fills the air. So, he moved the microphones farther away, creating a bigger, more atmospheric sound. Other musicians, including Roger Waters of Pink Floyd, noticed this and said it changed everything. Before Clapton, guitar playing in England was simple. After Clapton, it became powerful, raw, and full of feeling. His status as a British cultural icon was officially recognized when artist Sir Peter Blake included Clapton in a modern version of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album cover. And he became one of the first musicians to be honored with a star on the Walk of Fame at the Royal Albert Hall, a venue he had played more than any other in his career. This put him alongside legends like Muhammad Ali, Winston Churchill, and Albert Einstein, figures who shaped history in their own way. However, not everyone sees Clapton as a perfect hero. Some critics say that while he is a brilliant guitarist, his songwriting is inconsistent, and his albums don't always live up to his talent. Robert Christgau, a well-known music journalist, once wrote that Clapton had guitar hero's disease, an artist who was great at playing but sometimes lacked depth in his music. Others have criticized his personal views and actions, including controversial comments he made in the 70s. This has led to mixed feelings about his legacy, especially among younger musicians. His influence is so deep that he is even mentioned in other artists' songs. In Moon Song, singer Phoebe Bridgers originally wrote the lyric, "We hate Eric Clapton," though she later changed it to "We hate tears in heaven," referring to his heartbreaking song about the loss of his son. Other musicians, like MJ Lenderman, reference the famous idea that Clapton was once considered a near mythical figure in rock. Despite the controversy, there is no denying that Eric Clapton changed music forever. His guitar playing inspired generations, his innovations in recording shaped the way albums sound, and his presence in rock history is impossible to erase. Whether loved, criticized, or debated, Clapton's name will always be one of the most important in the story of music. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.